Elizabeth, could you tag us?
Charlie, I'm going to talk over the music for just a second. You're listening to Midpoint on WMNF 88.5 FM and WMNF.org. I'm Sean Canan, your host on Mondays. 2 years ago, a Chechen man was shot to death while he was being interrogated by the FBI in Orlando. Ibrahim Todashev was being questioned about what he knew about the Boston Marathon bombing suspect who had been killed shortly after the attacks in Boston. During the long interview, the FBI says their agents were attacked by Todashev before he was shot to death. Now the family of Todashev is suing the FBI. And joining me in the studio today are Hassan Shibli, the Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations Florida, and CAIR Florida's Legislative and Government Affairs Director, Layla Abdelaziz. Hi to you both.
Hey.
Hey Sean, thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for joining me. Let me start with you, Hassan. What can you tell us about what happened a couple of years ago in Orlando and how the FBI's story has changed since then?
Well, the FBI's never really had a consistent story about what happened that fateful night, but through our own independent investigation, what we basically confirmed happened is that FBI agents went to law-abiding Muslims in the Orlando region and made threats to them. Those threats were that you have two options. You can spy for us on mosques, you can spy for us on hookah lounges, you can spy for us on halal restaurants, or we'll take away your green cards and we'll throw you in jail. Those threats were made to Ibrahim Todashev's friends and possibly even to Ibrahim Todashev himself. Ibrahim Todashev was a Chechen Muslim living in Orlando, and he had went to the same gym as one of the Tsarnaev brothers, but he had absolutely no connection with terrorism, violence, or any criminal activity. And an FBI agent interrogated Ibrahim Todashev in his home for about 6 hours, and after 6 hours, Ibrahim Todashev ended up with 3 shots to the back, 3 shots to the front, and 1 bullet to the back of the head. He was killed by that FBI agent. Initially, the FBI claimed that he had a gun, then a knife, then a sword, and then the most accurate reports actually revealed that he was unarmed at the time of the killing. And we really still don't know exactly what happened, and that is why we are bringing a lawsuit against the FBI to bring justice to Ibrahim Todashev and his family, to answer the questions that they have, and to push for a change in policy that nobody who's being interrogated by the FBI, nobody who is a witness to anything or even a suspect should end up dead, because that doesn't benefit anyone. And it's been very clear, as we saw with Eric Garner, who was choked to death by a police officer in New York, also being unarmed and killed as he cried, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." It's very clear we can't trust police to police themselves. We as citizens have to hold law enforcement accountable, and when the criminal justice system fails to hold officers who take the lives of unarmed individuals accountable, we have to do it ourselves through the civil courts.
And that's part of the reason that you traveled to Russia in the last week or two. You went to Russia, you announced that there would be a lawsuit filed against the FBI. Tell us about this lawsuit.
That's correct. We went to Moscow. We announced that we were suing the FBI here in Tampa, and then 2 days later, we met with reporters and Ibrahim Todashev's father in Russia to speak about the lawsuit, and actually sat with his mother. His mother was still grieving and crying as if she lost her son only days ago. You know, you wouldn't be able to tell that this happened almost 2 years ago now. And one thing she said that really was profound to us was that she said, "Whenever I hear about an unarmed teenager or child or person getting killed in America by law enforcement, I feel like they are my son. I feel like they are all my children." And I promised her that we will not stop until we bring her justice. And again, the purpose of the lawsuit, that we basically, what we did right now is, by law, you have to give the FBI a heads up. You know, when you want to sue a regular citizen, you can just sue them. You can catch them by surprise in a sense, but the law really protects the FBI, and in that sense, it requires us to give them 6 months' notice, including all the witnesses and what claims we have. So we sent a notice of claim, which people can view on our website, CAIR Florida, CAIR Florida.org, and read that notice of claim, informing them that we're suing them basically for 2 major reasons. One is the negligent hiring of what appears to be a very corrupt police officer who would end up becoming the FBI agent who killed Ibrahim Todashev. In our investigation, working in partnership with one major media outlet, we actually discovered that the FBI agent who shot and killed Ibrahim Todashev worked as a police officer some years back in Oakland, and in his time as a police officer, he was sued twice and investigated 4 times for such wrongful conduct as beating up suspects, beating up witnesses, and falsifying evidence. Then he retired from the police department on disability, and yet, even though he was on disability, managed to become a FBI agent. So he's a very shady background, and we believe that kind of negligent hiring contributed to the killing of Ibrahim Todashev. Somebody like with such a checkered history as Aaron McFarlane, the FBI agent who killed Ibrahim, should have never been hired by the FBI in the first place. We sent them a demand to explain themselves and to change their hiring practices, and they refused to listen, so that's why we're suing. Secondly, is we believe the killing would not have happened absent gross civil rights violations and human rights violations that those agents involved in before that agent ended up killing Ibrahim Todashev.
I'm going to give out the number so that people can call in and join this conversation. My name is Sean Kanan, and my guests are Layla Abdelaziz and Hassan Shibli. They're both from CAIR, Florida. The number is 813-238-8001. You can give us a call and we'll put your questions on the air. You can also email us at dj@wmnf.org or send us a text to area code 813-433-0885. And Layla, I want to ask you about some of the, we can talk about the Todashev case if that's what callers want to talk about, but we can mention some of the legislative priorities that CAIR has in the Florida legislature that just started last week. And one of the bills that you are opposing is, you say there's no room for politically motivated proselytizing in Florida schools, and that's about a documentary. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Senator Alan Hayes is proposing a bill that would make it mandatory for all Florida 8th and 11th grade students to watch a documentary called America Imagine the World Without Her. And when the Muslim American community in Florida specifically has a history with Senator Alan Hayes. He was the sponsor of the anti-foreign law bill, which stemmed from the anti-Sharia movement, and we immediately had concern with this proposed legislation. We viewed the film and found a lot of very worrisome aspects and a lot of very worrisome issues that the film explores, and it's mainly just it's a very politically motivated documentary that would expose all Florida students to right-wing propaganda. I mean, to say it exactly as it is. And this would be the first ever attempt by a Florida legislature to mandate the viewing of any film in the Florida school system. And we think it's very hypocritical of Senator Hayes to oppose Common Core and then try to impose such a film on all Florida students.
America Imagine the World Without Her has been described as dishonest and laughable by conservative and liberal movie reviewers. So it's not just that it's a viewpoint that you oppose, you also find it to be academically not worthwhile.
Oh, it's absolutely academically unwarranted. I mean, the University of Miami historian Nicole Hemmer has a lot of issues with the film itself, and she has written about this a lot in the media recently, talking about the lack of academic standing that this film has, and there's really no room for such propaganda in our school system.
That's Layla Abdelaziz from CAIR, Florida. We also have Hassan Shibli from CAIR, Florida. 813-239-9663 is the number to call. And you can also email us at dj@wmnf.org. And one of the other bills that's in the Florida legislature, in this case you support it, is supporting protective measures for confidential informants. Why is this a bill that you support?
Absolutely. So in 2008, the Tallahassee Police Department used a young woman by the name of Rachel Hoffman. She was a Florida State University graduate, and they used her as a confidential informant, and really what was an undercover vice operation. I mean, they had sent what they called a confidential informant to a very high-risk vice operation, and they had her wiretapped, and they had given her the money for this potential drug exchange, and they had not even looked into the history of these men that she was meeting with. Had they looked into the history, they would have realized that these men were not actually drug dealers. They were very violent criminals from such a young age, and they were never even intending on selling her drugs. They just saw that this young, naive woman was offering them $13,000 for a very high amount of drug exchange, and she was also asking to buy a firearm from them. And when they sent her in for the operation, for the undercover operation, she's wiretapped. The wiretap is in her purse. The two gentlemen are only intending to steal her purse with the money. They steal her purse, find the wiretap, and shoot her with the gun that she was intending to purchase from them. And really what happened after the death of Rachel Hoffman was just this national discovery of how unregulated the use of confidential informants is in all law enforcement agencies, from the state to the national level. And of course, the Muslim American community also faces a lot of issues with confidential informants, seeing as that federal agents approach a lot of community members to be confidential informants, but there's no regulations. There's no state-mandated regulations. What happened in 2009 was the state legislature did pass something called Rachel's Law in response to what happened with Rachel Hoffman in 2008, but it really left the majority of the regulatory teeth that the bill had in it out of the legislation. And this legislation would mandate that state law enforcement track and report to the state legislature and to the elected representatives of the state of Florida how they're using confidential informants, what the ROI, what the impact of use of confidential informants is having on investigations in state law enforcement. And we think that this is a very safe and needed oversight measure for our elected officials to take over law enforcement.
So it's not a case where you're saying that law enforcement should never use confidential informants, but you're saying that they should be protected, there should be some oversight to that.
Absolutely. I mean, the use of confidential informants is without question very important to law enforcement investigations. But there's also a stark difference between using confidential informants that are protected, that are explained, they have protective measures from law enforcement, explain their rights and explain the risk that they're taking, and have the opportunity to not become confidential informants. One of the measures that this bill includes is giving potential confidential informants the opportunity to consult with a lawyer before signing a contract with law enforcement. And we see this very common with the use of confidential informants, that law enforcement will make some sort of deal with the because most often confidential informants are brought to law enforcement because of drug possession or a minor crime, and they're told that in exchange for their cooperation with law enforcement that they can get a lesser penalty for the crime. But then you have law enforcement taking advantage of confidential informants, saying, okay, well, you did this, but we want you to do more, and we want you to do more, and we want you to do more. And they really push the limits, putting confidential informants that are really not trained for these high-risk vice situations in harm's way.
Well, one of the major issues as the American Muslim community we're dealing with when it comes to confidential informants is author Trevor Ahrens in his book, The Terror Factory, has documented how there are over 15,000 people paid often to go into mosques and act as confidential informants and spy on the Muslim community, which is wrong in and of itself, because you can't spy on people simply because of their religion, which is protected by the First Amendment. But to make matters worse, it's not that they're just being confidential informants, they're actually acting as agent provocateurs. They're paid to find troubled individuals, often who may be schizophrenic or have other mental problems, and brainwash them to agree to commit crimes. And we see two major problems with this. One is many times the confidential informants are more of a threat. I mean, we've had cases where child rapists have been used as these confidential informants / agent provocateurs. And those people are actually a bigger threat to society than the subject of that sting. So the good thing about this legislation is it will have more transparency about who's being used as a confidential informant. And hopefully we can work to make sure that the confidential informants aren't the bigger threat as they often are, as we've witnessed many times. In fact, those who are used as confidential informants against the Muslim community and agent provocateurs have often been reported to the police for disrupting the community and causing chaos within the community. And the police, of course, do nothing. They just send them to another mosque to cause chaos there. The other problem is often, sometimes very good people are forced, wrongfully blackmailed to become confidential informants. And the great thing about this law is, again, it would put the law enforcement in a position where they also have to allow that person to speak to an attorney before becoming a confidential informant. And we believe, these steps for transparency are critical. Law enforcement must be transparent.
We have several people on the phone, so I want to get to those those calls. You can give us a call at 813-239-9663. You can send us a text to 813-433-0885, or email us at dj@wmnf.org. My guests are Hassan Shibli, the Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations Florida. We also have CAIR Florida's Legislative and Government Affairs Director, Layla Abdelaziz. I'm Sean Canan. It's 12:31 in the afternoon. You're listening to Midpoint on 88.5 FM WMNF Tampa. And we have Margot on the line. Hi, Margot. What would you like to say?
Hi, I wanted to let you know, I saw that movie America last week under, someone gave it to me, and I tried to watch it with like an open mind and trying to figure out like what was his objective of that whole movie. It was very bizarre, like he twisted the history, and then he kind of made it seem like he accused Saul Alinsky of worshiping the devil.
Absolutely.
And then he said that the whole point was like people shouldn't question the government, and that we shouldn't. And he was saying how evil it was that community organizing, and how that should not, like, you should just be thankful that you live in America and just go with it, go with whatever they dish out. And I kept thinking, like, what was his agenda? It was the most bizarre hour and a half that I spent. And I still think about, like, what was he trying to say? Because none of that made any sense. It was just, and I tried to be objective about it.
And that's really why we're against this film, because we believe it's bad for America, it's bad for our children, it's bad for education. You know, I think we're all very grateful to live in this country and have the freedoms that we do, but as a well-known saying goes, those who don't learn from the mistakes of history are bound to repeat it. And as any great nation, we've certainly had our share of mistakes in our development. Our leaders have not been flawless, they've made mistakes. But the beauty about making mistakes is that you learn from them and hopefully you don't repeat them. And this film certainly tries to eliminate or portray that we've never made any mistakes, and that's very dangerous because it tried to show that the killing of Native Americans was not a mistake. In fact, we were saviors in that regard, and that's a very dangerous precedent to set. So I agree, the film is indeed very bizarre. I couldn't sit through the whole thing myself.
The film portrays a lot of chapters of American history in very disturbing light, such as saying that Native Americans killed themselves. It was not with each other. He also made a very disturbing analysis of the taking of Mexican territory. He said, yes, we did take Mexican territory, and then we gave half of it back, but the current half that live in the half that we gave back, don't they wish that we had kept that territory to ourselves now? He also cites a really misconstrues Islamic theology, saying that Islamic theology promotes looting to trade. He portrays our chapter of slavery in a very, very disturbing light. I mean, it's entirely unacademic. Absolutely. So to take that step further, I definitely would encourage everyone to reach out to their state senator and their state house representative and let them know how they feel about this legislation, because if we don't let them know, then this bill could very easily pass through the current the current Florida legislature.
Margo, this is Senate Bill 96, it's House Bill 77. The Senate bill is sponsored by Alan Hayes, and House Bill 77 is sponsored by Representative Neil Comby. Thanks so much for that call, Margo. I appreciate that. We're going to move on. Thanks so much for calling.
Margo.
And Tony in Dunedin, as soon as my computer, yeah, there you go. Tony in Dunedin, you're on the air. Hi.
But I remember when the incident first happened, it was very sad. The only thing I can think of is that perhaps he had information that he wasn't supposed to have. I know he was friends, or he
Thank you. There's absolutely a lot more questions than there are answers, and we hope our lawsuit will at least help us answer some of those questions or possibly uncover a lot more questions.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for that call, Tony. Yeah, thank you for that. And you know, when this happened, when the reports were first coming out about the Todashev killing, it was the people that I heard, like his roommate, I think, and some of his neighbors were saying that he had been kind of hounded maybe by the FBI for months and months, and that they were saying, you know, this is it. This is the last interview we're going to have with you. Just give us this information now, and then we'll leave you alone. And so there was a sense that I got that maybe he was getting frustrated with how much they were dragging this on. What can you tell us about that?
Correct. I mean, he was really cooperating with their entire investigation, answering all their questions, meeting with them, and they were very visibly hounding him. You know, when police want to monitor someone, they typically don't let that person know that he's being monitored, whereas in this case, the FBI would very visibly send cars after him or to wait outside his apartment to send him a message that we're here, we're watching you. And finally, after a very long time of that questioning, Ibrahim, it was time for him to go and visit his family and his siblings back in Russia. So he actually purchased a ticket to go home to Russia. He bought a lot of gifts and presents for his 10 siblings that he has over there, or his 11 siblings that he has over there. And he was ready to fly home, and then they begged him not to go. The FBI couldn't stop him because he hadn't done anything wrong. So they begged him. They said, please don't go. This will be the absolute last questioning. It will be the last time you ever speak with us. And I tell you what, Sean, they were not lying. It indeed was the last time he spoke to them, of course, but not by any way we could have imagined. So he actually postponed his flight to sit, and he answered 6 hours of their questioning. What happened in those 6 hours that would result in him having 3 bullets in the back and 1 bullet to the back of the head in addition to 3 in the front? That's what we're trying to find out. It just does not add up.
813-239-9663 or dj@wmnf.org. If you'd like to join this conversation, you can also send us a text to 813-433-0885. We're going to go now to Mike in Tampa. Hi, Mike.
Yes. This is WMNF. Can I get your first name and where you're calling from? Yeah, this is WMNF. Can I get your first name and where you're calling from? Mike and Brandon. Okay, I'm going to put you on hold and we'll get you on the air as soon as we can.
Mike, are you talking about a statement that made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? I'm sorry, neither of our guests knows about those statements. Sorry about that.
Hello?
Thank you for calling in, Mike. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to promote freedom of speech in our society and allow moviegoers to choose what movies they see in the movies, and it's definitely another thing to mandate school children to see a politically motivated movie. So, you know, 2 different subjects there, but thank you for calling in.
Mike dropped off, but so, I mean, he brought it up, The Intercept. Should President Obama have the interview, that's right. Yeah, it's a big distinction. So the interview, you know, he said that President Obama kind of supported that it should be shown. I mean, do you agree?
I personally haven't seen the interview, and living growing up in America, I absolutely defend people's freedom of speech, whether I think that it's respectful or disrespectful. It's not really within my means to inhibit someone's freedom of speech or freedom of expression, whether it's artistically or not artistically. But when it comes to public education and the state legislature mandating that school children watch a politically motivated film, that's definitely legislative oversight, and it's inappropriate.
And the interview, kind of, there's parallels maybe with the Charlie Hebdo cartoons in Paris. 813-239-9663 or dj@wmnf.org if you'd like to join this conversation. My guests are Hassan Shibli from CAIR Florida and Layla Abdelaziz from CAIR Florida. It's 12:43 in the afternoon. My name is Sean Canan, and you're listening to Midpoint on 88.5 FM and WMNF.org. We're going to go now to Mohammed in Tampa. Hi, Mohammed. What would you like to say?
The Muslim people, I mean, I'm talking in general about all the religions, all we're bringing just death and destruction and misguidance. We need to stop complaining and start doing something positive. You know what I mean? So what if we put Muhammad naked in those pictures? Not even, you know what I mean? Very careful. You know what I mean? This is 2015. If you don't accept that, you shouldn't even be 2015. If you accept to drive a car and to fly an airplane that uses all this kind of technology, why your brain and your mind did not change? This is freedom of speech. I don't know what's wrong. It's mythology. It is just like Christianity, Judaism, the rest of the religion. The Muslim people are by look, as human beings are not in a religion. I'm not a fan of Muhammad. I don't believe in a religion, period. But the Muslims, they need to stop crying. All they're doing is just crying and destruction and killing and buy into the mythology. What they want to do, bring the world back to 10 centuries ago? Enslave them?
So, Mohammed, I have to admit, I haven't heard our guests mention anything about the things you're talking about.
In general, sir, this is just my own statement. In general, I don't know what movie, I'm sure there is an ideology behind anything, you know what I mean? Maybe it's misleading or whatever, but at the same time, we need to respect freedom of speech and have have programs like that to tell us the truth about what's going on. But at the same time, we shouldn't. People are working for many centuries to get to what we are at right now. Here you can pray, you can do anything in this country, in your own country. You can't do that. Go back to any Muslim country, they will chop your head off.
Mohammed, thanks for that call.
I think there were a lot of generalizations made in those comments, and I certainly appreciate the concern about the need for peace and civility and discourse. I don't think making generalizations like that is productive. Leila and I just came back from Moscow, and one of the